Welcome to another video in our series on Civil War military engineering. This video is part of our Pontoon Bridges of the 97th U.S. Colored Infantry segment. And this one focuses on the very first pontoon bridge that this regiment would possess, an inflatable India-rubber pontoon bridge. This bridge would be put to use in multiple campaigns in 1863 and gained special notoriety as being the bridge that the Louisiana Native Guards crossed on their way to their infamous assault at the siege of Port Hudson. This type of bridge was carried over from the war with Mexico and was phased out early in the American Civil War. India rubber products were very popular during the 1860s. Goodyear's patent on his improved rubber product made him a very wealthy man at the time. Products using India rubber included both civilian and military applications. There were all kinds of things, from combs, shoes, blankets, and a myriad of other uses. The inflatable ball, and thus the inflatable pontoon, found its way into military engineer service as portable boats for pontoon bridges and into the initial hostilities of the American Civil War. The India rubber pontoon bridge, in which the officers and men of the 97th U.S. Colored Infantry would possess, originated with the 42nd Massachusetts. This regiment has multiple connections to the 95th and 97th U.S. Colored Infantries, but we're going to focus on the companies that were detached on engineer service and the pontoon bridge that they possessed. The 42nd Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry was originally a 90-day regiment that mustered into service in late 1862. It was sent to New Orleans, served under General Butler, was assigned to the 19th Corps. From there, its individual companies were dispersed and assigned to various duties. Some companies of the regiment were sent to Galveston Island in December of 1862 and would be captured after the Battle of Galveston on January 1st, 1863. Several companies of the 42nd Massachusetts participated in the First Bayou Teche Campaign. Other companies, such as C, H, and K, were assigned to engineer service. In January 1863, Companies C and H were at Carrollton, Louisiana, under supervision of Major D.C. Houston, U.S. Engineers. Several work parties of newly emancipated African American men were also at Carrollton. They were put to work unloading vessels and working on repairing levees. Enlisted men of the 42nd supervised them. It is these men that would be formed into the 1st Louisiana Engineers that would become the 95th and 97th U.S. Colored Infantries. A separate video will cover more detail on the engineer regiment that was mustered into service at that refugee camp at Carrollton, Louisiana. But because this video focuses on that inflatable India rubber pontoon bridge, we need to give our focus back to Company K. Company K of the 42nd Massachusetts reported to Major Houston for duty in the engineer service in order to take charge of the pontoon train. The pontoon train headquarters was at the Shippers Cotton Press in New Orleans, Louisiana. According to the History of the 42nd Regiment Infantry, Massachusetts Volunteers by Sergeant Major Charles P. Boson, the pontoons in two sizes were made of rubber, inflated with air by hand bellows in lieu of air pumps. Such miscellaneous articles such as planks, guy ropes, oars, etc. occupied a large amount of space. These 30 wagons, drawn by 4 mules to each wagon, were used to transport this bridge and material. This bridge was referred to as cumbersome and clumsy looking. With only 50 men fit for duty, the men of Company K learned how to handle the pontoons without instruction from the engineering officer by practice drills with sections of the bridge. To bridge a river or bayou, the required number of rubber pontoons were inflated by hand bellows, then launched and placed in position. Afterwards, planked, and then fastened by ropes to remain steady. The first use of this bridge by the 42nd Massachusetts was at Bayou Montesino, 5 miles from Baton Rouge. They threw the bridge, 75 feet long, across the bayou. Federal troops crossed the bridge on their way to Port Hudson in March 1863, and then taken up and returned to New Orleans aboard the steamer Sally Robinson. For 2 weeks afterwards, the men made alterations in the pontoons in preparation for the next campaign. In March 1863, First Sergeant J. Gilbert Hill and Sergeant William Shepard were detached by special orders and ordered to Baton Rouge to report to Captain Justin Hodge, assistant quartermaster and abolitionist, to be on recruiting service for the new 1st Louisiana Engineers, a colored regiment. On April 5th, Company K, with the inflatable rubber pontoon bridge, were ordered to Brashear City. The pontoon train was loaded onto railroad cars at Algiers and then unloaded at Brashear City. The bridge was put together about a mile from camp below the city on April 9th and was 287 feet long. Putting up the inflatable bridge took the entire day and had the men completely worn out. The next day, the bridge was towed up the Bayou Teche in Pattersonville, 3 miles above Brashear, by the steamers St. Mary and Sykes. Federal forces crossed the bridge at this location, and then it was towed up to a new location 3/4 of a mile from the battlefield at Fort Bisland on the 13th. The bridge was then towed back to Brashear City. Heavy rains necessitated that the bridge material be put to use as planking for roadbed. The bridge planking was partitioned out, and sections used on the roads in the vicinity of Brashear. There it was loaded onto wagons and taken to the steamer G.A. Sheldon for transport to Byers Landing via Grand Lake and the Atchafalaya. When Company K's commanding officer was deemed unfit and placed under arrest, Captain John J. Smith of the newly formed 1st Louisiana Engineers was placed in temporary command of the 42nd Massachusetts men of Company K. On May 5th, the men received orders to proceed to Alexandria, Louisiana with the inflatable pontoon bridge. It accompanied the Federal Army up to Washington, Cheneyville, and Alexandria. Unused, the pontoon train left Alexandria on May 13th, reaching Simmsport on the 17th. The current was too strong and river too wide for the bridge to be used. 2 pontoon rafts and an abutment were built the next day for a part of the Army to cross the Atchafalaya River to take transports at points on the Red River to Port Hudson. Company K proceeded upon the steamer Forest Queen, arriving at Bayou Sara on the 24th of May, and the pontoon teams arrived the next day and were loaded onto transports. At 4 a.m. in the morning on May 26th, the inflatable pontoon bridge and Company K moved forward, marching 16 miles, arriving at 2 p.m., and marched over a light footbridge pioneers and the Louisiana Native Guards had made, and laid the pontoon bridge over the Bayou Sandy on the federal right of the siege lines at Port Hudson. the Louisiana Native Guards were skirmishing with the enemy in a cool, collected manner. Under these conditions, the work commenced on laying the inflatable pontoon bridge, 200 feet long. Shot and shell from Confederates, less than a mile away, flew over the heads of the men at work. At night, the 3rd and 4th Regiments of the Louisiana Native Guards, later designated 75th and 76th U.S. Colored Infantries, arrived. At 5 a.m., May 27, 1863, the 73rd and 75th U.S. Colored Infantries crossed the inflatable India-rubber Pontoon Bridge in their valiant assault on the Confederate redoubt. During the multiple advances made by the colored troops at Port Hudson, Confederate shells exploded among the treetops about Bayou Sarah, where the pontooniers guarded the bridge. After the assault of May 27, 1863, that pontoon bridge was taken up, loaded onto wagons, and readied for immediate use anywhere on the lines. On June 4th, the entire pontoon train was moved to a location near General Banks' headquarters. Less than a week later, that bridge was divided up into sections and partitioned out to division commanders so that in future assaults it could be laid across the ditch in front of the enemy works. On June 20th, Company K of the 42nd Massachusetts was relieved from engineer service. Captain Pelfrey, U.S. Engineers, ordered the 300-foot pontoon bridge material with wagons to be turned over to Colonel Justin Hodge of the 1st Louisiana Engineers, which had recently been redesignated as the 1st Engineers Corps d'Afrique. Captain John J. Smith remained in command of the inflatable India-rubber Pontoon Bridge. The 1st Louisiana Engineers were very active in the siege of Port Hudson, and like the Louisiana Native Guard, received special recognition for their heroism. After the surrender of Port Hudson on July 8th, Captain John J. Smith and the African American soldiers of Company B, 1st Engineers, Corps d'Afrique, loaded up the inflatable pontoon bridge upon wagons and took it to Donaldsonville, where it was laid across the Bayou Lafourche, stretching 213 feet. It connected the town of Donaldsonville with Fort Butler. A month later, these men of the 1st Engineers would be redesignated as the 3rd Engineers, Corps d'Afrique, when the regiment was split into 2 parts. Would later be redesignated as the 97th U.S. Colored Infantry. A year later, the Engineer Department of the Department of the Gulf would report that the inflatable India-rubber pontoon bridge at Donaldsonville had been replaced by a wooden bateau pontoon bridge. The same May 19, 1864 report by Captain Pelfrey, U.S. Engineers, stated the 95th U.S. Colored Infantry, formerly the 1st Engineers Corps d'Afrique, had 80 feet of the old India-rubber pontoon bridge at Brownsville, Texas, and it was reported to be so worn as to be useless and quite unfit to be sent into the field, and that remains of the same bridge are in New Orleans. And so, the story of the inflatable India-rubber pontoon bridge ends. Our next video in this series will follow the wooden bateau bridge through the Red River Campaign. For more information on pontoon bridges and Civil War military engineering, check out our website, 97th USCT. Also, look forward to more videos on that subject on this YouTube channel, 97th USCT. Thank you for watching.